Hello, thank you for joining Rupert Cooks. Today we are making probably the most photographed and displayed apple tart ever. The French apple tart with the thin slices arranged in concentric circles around the top with a nice finish on it and everything. It's not that difficult to make, it just takes a little bit of time, and it looks great when it lands on the dinner table, whether you take it to somebody's house or serve it at your own. So to start off, we have 5 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, a tablespoon of salt, 11 ounces of shortening. I keep my shortening in the freezer to make sure it's cold. You need this cold. You cannot be using this room temperature for this. And then 6 ounces of butter. And we are going to start with using the mixer and combining our dry ingredients and then cutting the butter in. All right, so you can do this in a food processor. You can do it by hand. You can also do it in a mixer as I'm using. So I'm going to start by putting in our 5 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, then our tablespoon of salt, then our paddle attachment. And I'm going to put it on slow just to mix them together a little bit and try not to shoot all the flour out of the bowl. Now I'm going to add in our cold butter, which I cut into the small pieces. And we're going to go until that is cut into the flour and make sort of like a coarse sand kind of look. Okay, next we are going to add our cold vegetable shortening to this a little bit at a time and keep going until it sort of forms something that you can kind of barely stick together or stick together a little bit with your fingers. So that's next. All right, so I have a cup of ice here and 1 cup of water. So I want to get this water ice cold, but I don't want the ice melting in the water, so I add too much water. So what I'm going to do is pour the 1 cup into the ice, swizzle it around like a fine drink. And then we're going to go and add until it is just incorporated into our dough. And that's it. You can tell by the pleasant sound that the mixer makes that that's about as much as you want to take it. So we're going to turn this out onto a surface and work it a little bit and wrap it up and cool it. Okay, so we've got it all out on our surface. And this comes together pretty nicely. Just make sure it's absolutely mixed up well. Playing around in the sandbox. And so I'm trying to get it into a reasonable shape like this because this makes enough for 4 pies. And you can refrigerate it and use it later in the week, or you can freeze it. But let's get this all divided up as best we can. It looks about, there's a quarter, there's a quarter, there's a quarter, there's a quarter. All right. And this is really helpful if you can get it into a round shape. I like doing it in a round shape, not a ball, because this is going to go in the refrigerator for a while. We're going to need to refrigerate this for a couple of hours. So we're going to get it into a sort of a patty so that when it's refrigerated and it comes out, our rolling out process is going to be a little bit easier. If you do this in a ball, I find it's just a lot more work. There's our patty. There's one. And I'm going to wrap this up in plastic, do the rest, and refrigerate them. And I'll see you back here in a couple of hours for more fun. Okay, so our dough has chilled, and we need to roll it out on our lightly floured surface here. And we're going to be putting this in a 9-inch diameter by 1-inch loose bottom tart pan. So if it's 9-inch diameter, and 1 inch sides, that means we need 9 inches plus 1 inch plus 1 inch, which is 11 inches, circle to make it fill out in the tart pan. So we've got our dough all rolled out, and I actually chilled this for quite a while here. Unfortunately, our little patty didn't hang together, but that's fine. I'm just gonna form it into sort of kind of as best a circle as I can. And like pie crust the world over, it's sort of not the easiest to work with. And I'm using my roller with the little guides on it here. And since it's a metric roller, this is a 6 millimeter guide, I think, which gives me, I could have that wrong, but it gives me about 1/6 of an inch thickness. So let's get this rolled out. And I think that this actually is more than enough to get the diameter we want here. Now, and we want to keep these edges here from fraying as we go along. And so the two things with rolling out this kind of pie crust is you don't want to mess it up and have to roll it out several times, because it just gets tougher every time you do that. And you don't want it to stick to your rolling surface. So I flip it over every now and then and just re-amalgamate it and keep rolling. I mean, hopefully this will all work out, even though it looks pretty messy now. It is a bit of a job, as you can see, but we'll get there. Alright, so I'm just going to trim off the stuff that's clearly not going to be used. I'm just going down lightly because I don't want to score this marble is actually pretty soft, and if you get too vigorous with cutting around it, you can really score it up. I'm going to really go around it off there. Okay, so we have our dough in the pan, and we are going to bake this before filling this. So we want to get it definitely pressed all the way into the corners, because if you have the corner, the inside corner, because if you have the inside corner unsupported and hanging up in the air, like it'll do when you first flop it in, that's a good place for it to break. But you also want to feel that you're not getting too built up on the inside corner, this corner right down here, because when you cut into a slice of pie and you got that big fillet on the inside corner, that's an area of toughness that's not so good. Now, next thing we want to do is we want a little ledge so that this overhangs the tart pan a little bit. And that's to support it when pre-baking so it doesn't kind of cave in. So I'm going to come along here with my finger, and I'm running my index finger along here and sort of using my thumb on the opposite hand to sort of bend it down and form a little ledge there. I'm just going to come along with some shears and cut it so I've got a pretty consistent, about a half inch in this dimension, overhang. All right. So now that's overhanging, but we kind of want it situated so it's half. So we're going to move this back in a little bit, and we're going to get sort of a little bit of a inside. So it's inside overhanging there a little bit, but also still overhanging on the outside a little bit. And I'm just, it's a little narrow there. I'm just going along and pushing and doing that. Trying to make it so you can see here. I'm also trying to even it out a little bit, you know, pretty it up. And boy, I'll tell you, the more tedious the task, the more the cat wants to come and be a part of it. You can see she's circling, doing her. I'm going to jump up on the counter, look. Move it over in some of these rougher areas. Okay, and now, if we want, we can come along and do a little bit of decoration here. And it also helps get that crust locked onto the tart pan edge a little bit. I'm going pretty quickly here, but you get the idea. Yes, thank you for your contribution, Stevie. I know. And you could do a fancier decoration here if you have the inclination. All right. So we've got our crust all done. Guess what it is? Since it's a pie crust, the eternal waiting game continues. We are going to refrigerate this for 30 minutes. And in the meantime, get our oven preheated to 400 degrees. And probably have to give the cat some attention so that she's satisfied for the next segment. So we'll see you back in a little bit. So I have an assortment of apples that were given to me by some friends. These are Honeycrisp apples. Now is a good time to think about which apples you want to use for the filling and which you want to use for the slices on top. So we have a 9-inch pan. So to go entirely across the top, well, so it's a 9-inch diameter pan, which means the radius is 4.5 inches. So if you're overlapping a little bit and you have 3-inch long apple slices to go 4.5 inches, that'll give you a half overlap with 2 slices. So you could go 2 circles around it. If you wanted to do more, you could do smaller apples like this. This one, once it's peeled and everything, you're going to wind up with 1.5-inch slices. So, or maybe 2-inch slices. So to go around 3 circles, you could use smaller ones like this. To go around just 2 circles, you could use bigger ones like this. So if you've come back with an assortment of apples, you might want to think about which ones you're going to use for the filling and which ones you're going to use for the top. So it's going to take 9 apples or so. I'm going to use 6 here for the filling and then 2 or 3 for the top. So I will peel and start coring, and then we will chop up and go from there. Okay, so I've got my 6 apples all peeled, and we're going to come along, use the hand stabbing device, otherwise known as the apple corer. And go along with a paring knife, get rid of any peel there or bad spots. Slice in half, and then we're going to cut each half into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 pieces on each half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 12 pieces. 5 more to go. So I have my apples all cored and chopped up. Now I've got a tablespoon of flour with a pinch of cinnamon in it. A couple of teaspoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice. I think fresh squeeze is a little bit better here. a half cup of fluffy breadcrumbs. I had some old French bread lying around, so I just toasted it and sort of smushed it up. A bigger, chunkier breadcrumb here is much better than fine. So if you have to go store-bought, get some panko breadcrumbs. Those are good. Do not use Italian seasoning breadcrumbs, or you will wind up with sort of spaghetti sauce tasting pie. And then 3/4 of a cup of sugar. So I'm gonna mix this all in. And it's okay if it's okay to do this a little bit. I wouldn't get too crazy ahead of time, but I'm just going to put this in the refrigerator because we are going to bake these in the oven to make applesauce. So if they get a little brown, it's really not going to make a difference. But it is now time to pre-bake our crust. Let's get that out of the refrigerator because it's been sitting in there long enough. And line it with some foil or something, put in some beans, I don't know, and then we're going to pop it in the oven. So we have our tart crust. It's been in the oven for, God, I can't keep doing that. We have our tart crust. It's been in the refrigerator for about a half an hour, just chilling. You might notice it's on a plate. The reason why I do that is because it's a loose bottomed tart pan. And the number of times I've placed it directly in the refrigerator and then come back a half hour later to lift it out and hit that bottom. And I've done it countless times. So if I put it on a plate, I remember not to do that. We are going to put a piece of parchment paper in here and then use our pie weights / beans. And you see how I'm shoving them in here? That's to get them to that inside corner because the parchment paper can really bridge over that, and then you can get a little bit of a not niceness when you take it out. So we are going to put this in our preheated 400-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then take it out and lower the heat to 375 and put our previously chopped up apples and whatnot in there to make the applesauce. So I'll see you back in a little bit. All right, so this has been in the oven for 20 minutes and I'm feeling the crust here, and it's pretty nice on the sides, but on the bottom it's still a little bit soft. So what I'm going to do is put it in for 5 minutes more for a total baking time at 400 of 25 minutes. But I'm going to put it for 5 minutes more without the weights. I've taken them off here. But let's just put it in for 5 more minutes. Okay, so our crust has come out. 25 minutes total baking time at 400 degrees. 20 minutes with the weights, then take the weights off, 5 more minutes. And I'm putting it on a cooling rack. And I've lowered our oven temperature to 375. And now we're going to put our apples into it. All right, so we have our apples that we've taken out of the bowl and put in a jelly roll pan. We've lowered our oven to 375 degrees. And we are going to put these in for about 15 to 20 minutes. You have to use a little bit of judgment here because what you're trying to do is get the apples to sort of give up a lot of their water. And the reason for that is so that we don't have a soggy bottom crust on our tart, as well as having things sufficiently dry that the apple slices and the concentric rings on top brown. And that's going to vary a lot by what apple you use. Like I feel like a Granny Smith is a little bit drier than these, which are Honeycrisp, which are very moist. I like the taste of them, but with this baking in a pie kind of thing, water is kind of always your enemy when you're baking a pie because it, at the very least, results in soggy crusts. But this will also affect the topping. So we're going to put it in for 15 minutes, check it, see how it's doing, and maybe go 5-10 minutes more. But we'll see back then. So these have been in about 5 minutes. I've taken them out. You can see there's still quite a bit of steam coming off of them, and they still feel pretty moist to me. There's a lot of water in the tray here. I don't know if you can see that so well, but given the amount of steam coming off of these, I'm going to go in for another 5 minutes. So we'll put them in and take them out and check again. All right, so it's been 5 minutes more. And there's water there, although it's melted sugar mostly now, but there's still steam coming off. But I'm feeling these and they're just about right. We don't want these totally dry because then that's going to be kind of gross. So this is about it. I'm going to let them cool down a little bit and then I'm going to mash them. Okay, so we have our apples in the bowl and I'm just using a pastry crust cutter to just go around and mash them up a little bit. What we want here is something, we do not want smooth applesauce here. Otherwise, I would just put them in the food processor and deal with the horrible noise. We want something that's mildly chunky, but not so chunky that we can't level it out and get a kind of smooth top for our apple slices to lay on. Oh, that's loud. You could use a potato masher or a heavy spoon if you want. I just find that this pastry cutter kind of works a little bit better. And we want to come up pretty much filling the whole shell because the apple slices do not take up a whole lot of room here. We're trying to get this as level as we can. There we go. Now we get to start slicing the apples up and laying them on top. Okay, so you can see I've got 4 apples. I've laid them out going from small to large. And at this point you have to decide if you want to do the middle first and work your way out or do the outside first and work your way in. Because I kind of like to have the bigger slices from the larger apples on the outside and the smaller ones towards the inside. So I'm going to work from the outside in. It really doesn't make a huge difference. And what I'm going to do is peel and core them, slice, put them in some lemon juice, then dry them on a paper towel a little bit because that's going to help with the toasting around the edges of the apple. So let's get this big one all cored and peeled and all that sort of thing. We'll start slicing. Okay, so we have our peeled and cored apple, and what we're going to do is slice it into quarters. All right, let's get rid of that quarter. That looks kind of ugh. And what we're going to do is using a sharp knife. You cannot use a dull knife for this. We are going to slice these between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. So I'm sort of going along here and kind of rotating my apple with every slice and pushing it a little bit forward with the fingers on my right hand so that I can get, I guess you would say, so that I can get radial cuts on this. And you really got to take your time here, obviously, because you're trying to get slices that look good. And so I'm cutting, I'm coming down with the knife and then going like that. I'm pushing it forward a little bit so that each cut is sort of going from the outside to a center point. I can't just cut flat without rotating it because then I'm going to get uneven slices. So, and if you get some that are kind of messed up, that's okay because there's always some filling in to do on this. And consistency is a thing here. You want these slices very similar thickness because if they're not similar thickness, the thicker ones are going to take longer to brown along the edge than the thinner ones. And you want a nice consistent look here, because that's why you're going to all this trouble. And you have to think about it, as I always say, as cooking is the one craft where you don't have a lot of stuff building up because you eat it all. And you already have your craft room all set up, assuming you have a kitchen. I don't know. If you don't, well, these might be a little bit more difficult for you. All right, so I've got some of these slices lined up on some paper towels here. And we're just going to take ones that are very similar and just start going around. So I'm putting one in there. There's sort of the outside of the apple and the inside, which is straight. So the inside should be a straight line coming from the outside of the crust going right to the middle. Because you don't want something where they're skewed like this. You want to get a nice little kind of pattern going here. And it's very easy to get these starting to go lopsided on you. So I'm watching out for that as well. I mean, this isn't rocket science or anything here, but it's one of those things where you don't want to look at it after laying them all out and be like, oh man, that really could have been better. So just going along here, going with the bigger slices that I have first, and laying out some more on the paper towels. And you can see how this starts using up a lot of apples pretty quickly. And it's going to take us probably a whole apple to get all the way around once. And then when you get closer to the end, you can just tuck the final one sort of under here. There you go. That is our first circle here. So let's keep going. So I'm looking at this, and if I go sort of half overlapping, right about half, I'll have 3 rings. So I'm going to make my next ring starting sort of a little bit off from where I finished the previous one to sort of hide that seam a little bit, and keep going around. Now you can really see how the core side of the apple, is that what it would be, is pointing in towards the middle a little bit. And if you get off, it becomes more pronounced as you go with your inner circles. So every apple slice is different. I'm trying to flatten these things out here a little bit. So now I'm on my final secret inner ring. So we're all done, and just gonna pat it down, paper towel, get rid of that last little bit of moisture. Oh my gosh. A little bit of evening up here as best we can. Oh my gosh, come on. Okay, so we've evened it up, blotted it a little bit. We've kept our oven at 375 degrees, and we are going to put it in. I'm going to put this on top of a jelly roll pan just to make sure, in case there's any leakage, but I'm going to put it in for 25 minutes and then give it a check and see where we're at. All right, so here we have our pie out of the oven. I did this for 20 minutes, rotating at 180 degrees at 10 minutes. Then I went 20 minutes more, 5 minutes at a time, rotating it every 5 minutes. And that's what I mean about these apple slices, the water content being very variable in them. Because what you want is this browning around the edges to give you that kind of definition. Now, it looks pretty good here, but we can do what's known as a clear glaze on it. And what I've got here is just some apricot preserves. And I've got about 3 tablespoons of preserves combined with about 3 tablespoons of water. And what this is going to do is give us a nice shiny final appearance. And this is actually better if you use one of those China bristle brushes. They're just sort of like a regular paintbrush. The thing I don't like about those is they can often leave behind a strand of brush, a brush bristle in your final dish, and then you serve it up to your friends, or if you have any, I don't know, and you've got a bristle in your thing and it looks like a hair, and then they're demanding their money back and they haven't even paid you anything. So it can be frustrating. You could also strain this if you like, strain the preserves and water mixture. I don't really do that because I kind of like seeing the little variegations in it and that sort of thing. So now I'm coming up on the crust a little bit, and there's a reason for that. Just to give it a little tackiness. Stickiness. Stickiness might be a more pleasant word. There you go. Just go around like that. And we're going to take a little bit of confectioner's sugar, just a little, and go lightly around the edges. And just sort of sets things off a little bit more nicerly. And just go over in any place where there's a little too much, just hit it with the brush a little bit. There we go. And there we go, all set. See the apricot jelly, you call it a clear glaze in the pastry world, sets it off nicely with this nice shine because you baked it and dried out the apples to get that black edge action going, but now they look kind of dry and lifeless a little bit in the non-blackened areas, and I feel that the apricot preserves, you could use whatever you want, apple preserves if you want. I feel that those really set it off nicely. So I hope you liked this episode and the tedious pie. Remember, as I said earlier, cooking is the one craft everybody pretty much has to do. You've got your craft room all set up. You don't have a lot of junk building up because you're eating it all. And have fun with the French apple tart. Once again, please like and subscribe. I would appreciate that. And I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining me.